dark, dark tomb there was a dark, dark street, and in the dark, dark street there was a dark, dark office. In the dark, dark office there were some dark, dark stairs, and down the dark, dark stairs there was a dark, dark room, and in the dark, dark room was where the worst wrestling tropes go to die.
Hello, I'm Ross Tweddell from Cultaholic, and welcome back to Straight to Hell, the show, of course, where my illustrious guest offers up a list of their pet peeves from the world of professional wrestling, and then they all get sent down straight to hell to rot for the rest of eternity. Our guest today, he needs no introduction. He is one of, if not the best interviewer in the game today. It's Mr. Chris Van Vliet himself, and I know what you're thinking. Ross, he is Mr. Positivity when it comes to professional wrestling. Yes, indeed, Mr. Chris Van Vliet did struggle to come up with 5 entries, but you know what? He's also a professional, so he did it. Chris Van Vliet, absolutely fantastic. I think I love him. Over to Chris and Ross. And so we're joined by someone who might just be the best interviewer in the world today, Mr. Chris Van Vliet, or should I say Mr. Chris Sharp.
Wow.
I'm going back.
Well, that's very, very kind of you to say, but I don't know. I mean, you've got a lot of very talented people that you work with that I think would take that title away from me.
Maybe Tom, but that's it.
Tom's so good.
Tom is the only professional we hire in terms of presenting and video work. So he's a radio guy anyway. So yeah, just Tom. Maybe Tom.
Well, Tom can balance out all the unprofessional people that you have.
And speaking of unprofessional, you've come to the right place. I am the most unprofessional guy that we hire by a country mile. But Chris, I need to start off this video before we get to your 5 choices to send down to hell by asking you to show me and the world your feet.
My feet?
Socks. That's the sort of...
Oh my God. Like, what did I sign up for? Jeez.
Do you not know this is OnlyFans?
I feel like I'm going to really let everyone down. So I'm currently living in California. I moved here 3 months ago. It's hot here.
Yeah.
All the time. You know, I'm very fortunate to live in this warm climate. So you can't, I'm not even wearing pants right now, let alone socks. Yeah.
Let's forget about that one. I was expecting you to have these flamboyant socks on. Wow.
I really let you down. I was wearing great socks yesterday. We should have done this yesterday.
Typical. Caught you on a bad sock day. We all have them, of course.
My goodness. Nobody wants to see my bare feet. Unless maybe, I had an OnlyFans or something.
There might be a market there, Chris. You never know.
That's terrifying. That's terrifying.
I was very sort of wary. Is wary the right word? It might be wary in approaching you to do this video series of all video series, just because of how positive you are about everything to do with professional wrestling. I was thinking Chris Van Vliet might struggle to think of 5 things to send down straight to hell. So was it a struggle?
It was. I'm going to be honest. It was a struggle to figure out 5 things because I always say, look, everyone looks at the negative things that are going on. Every Monday, every Wednesday, every Friday night, everybody picks apart the things they didn't like about the show. And then there's like the tiny little line or a handful of tweets about like, oh yeah, I actually did like that Roman Reigns thing that happened. So I'm the other way around. I like to look at all the good stuff and go, yeah, well, maybe there's a few things that need to be worked on, or maybe they didn't flesh that out as well as they could have. But I think there's good in every single situation. So yes, to narrow down 5 things was kind of tough. Although some of them, as you'll see, kind of like hone in on that idea of like positivity.
So are we coming from your perspective as a fan for this, or maybe as an interviewer in the media?
Definitely a fan. I mean, I'm a fan first, at which we all should be. Whether you work in this industry, whether you have the great privilege of being able to share some of these conversations with people in wrestling, we're all fans. Even if you're a wrestler, you're still a fan. So, yeah, this is coming from me, the 4-year-old kid who discovered wrestling for the very first time at my grandfather's house, to becoming a massive fan in the Attitude Era as a teenager, and then to whatever you want to call it that I am now, like just this giant nerd who asks lots of questions of people.
So what was it at your grandfather's house that you saw that got you hooked?
That was the first time I saw it. So, I just grew up in a family that enjoyed watching sports. Baseball was on, grew up in Canada, so obviously hockey was on a lot during the winter. So when I went over to my grandparents' house, they would just have sports on the TV. And when a baseball or hockey or basketball game wasn't on, wrestling would be on a Saturday night. And that's when I got introduced to the larger than life characters that we all fell in love with. Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, but also like Sergeant Slaughter and Coco Beware, the Repo Man, Doink the Clown. And, like any kid, when you're that age, you're just like, these guys are like real life action figures. This is incredible. But it was later on, probably about 10 years later, when I was in high school and I was on the high school wrestling team. So I kind of had like this appreciation for wrestling. But, you know, when you're a high school amateur wrestler, that stuff you see on TV, that stuff's fake. You know, what we do in here, what we do in the gym, this is real. So I had a friend who loved wrestling. And back in the 90s, when you had a friend, you did this crazy thing called talking on the phone. And it's completely obscure to talk about.
No thumbs used at all.
Right. So every Monday night we would talk on the phone until 9 o'clock because Raw was starting. And I knew that our phone call had to come to an end because Raw was starting. So one Monday I said, all right, Vince, his name was Vince, not McMahon, but a different Vince. I said, all right, man, I'll watch for like the first 10 minutes just so we can keep talking about what we were talking about. And I just got sucked in. It was Austin McMahon. That was the big storyline at the time. And I just got totally sucked in. And when I like love something and when I'm passionate about it, I dive all the way into it. So it went from me watching 0 minutes of wrestling a week to me watching everything, Raw and Nitro and ECW and Jacked and Metal and Heat, pay-per-views, everything, like from 0 to 60, boom, like that.
So your amateur wrestling days, did that cause you to have the sort of period away that some of us go through? I had a period away from wrestling for sort of 4, 5, maybe 6 years. Did the amateur wrestling force you to take a step back from the pro wrestling?
I just wasn't really into pro wrestling yet at that time. And I think it's interesting that you say that because wrestling's very cyclical. And how many times have we heard, as you know, these diehard wrestling fans that we are now, how many times have we heard, I used to watch that when I was a kid? And you're like, yeah, no, I get that. Like, give it another try now. You might come back around and appreciate it. So it wasn't amateur wrestling for me that kind of made me not watch. It was just, I wasn't really that into it at the time. But like everybody else, the Attitude Era, you know, was so incredibly entertaining. And, you know, that's not a slight at what WCW was doing because Nitro was awesome. I fell in love with the Cruiserweight Hour. So yeah, and once I got into it, I was into it and I still am.
Royal Rumble 2012 is what got me back in.
Really? Was it a specific match or were you...
I went to university and was on a sports journalism course and I was just, you know, making new friends and whatever first year. And then some people like, we watch wrestling. Do you fancy getting some beers and watching it live one night? And I was like, yeah, I used to watch that. And then watching Sheamus was back then, winning the Rumble. Yeah, I'm back in board. And then here I am today. It's a weird thing, but Rumble 2012, because nobody can tell you what happened at the Royal Rumble of 2012, can they? Can you?
I can't tell you a single match.
But that's the one that got me back in. And speaking of, you know, your exploits in the business, if, shall we say, HCW. We've got to mention it. I want to know more. I want to know how it started. I want to know sort of the biggest event maybe that happened. I want to know everything. Tell me everything.
All right. So the HCW was the Backyard Wrestling Federation that I was a part of in high school. So this was 2000 and 2001. And then in the fall of 2001, I went away to college and, you know, this whole thing disbanded. But it started because we had a friend and we would go to her house on the way home from school. It was like a group of like 10 of us. On the way home from high school, we go to her place and she had a trampoline. And me and my friend would do the moves that you do when you're a 15-year-old kid on a trampoline. You do rock bottoms, you do stunners. We were doing a few DDTs and we just, you know, this was great. We were making up these like really stupid little matches. And then we found out that another friend of ours, like a friend of a friend at a different high school, had started this Backyard Wrestling League. And we're like, oh, well, we are in. Like, we're not even going to ask. We're just joining. Like, we're going to show up and make this thing happen. And I honestly feel that's where like some of my like entrepreneurial like tendencies came from, because we built this thing up. We had a website. We filmed every show. We put the clips online, and I created this character, Chris Sharp, who is heavily inspired by Triple H. Like, I taped the wrist in one hand on my right hand and just the wrist on the other hand. And I didn't end every sentence like this, but I definitely cut promos that were very intense. I chewed gum while I was doing it. So that was so ridiculous telling this story. So Chris Sharp was a 2-time HCW heavyweight champion. And our league in my hometown of Pickering, Ontario, Canada, grew to be such a big thing that we were on a national like teen talk show in Canada called Jono Vision. And they made this episode about like people who had created these things. So we're on there with like legitimate like inventors, people who had actually like, they're 17 years old and they created this great invention. And then there's me and my friend Greg, who went by the wrestling name Rage, sitting there next to like these brilliant inventors. And we're like, oh yeah, we wrestle each other in our backyard.
It sounds like, I watched the CM Punk documentary years ago. It sounds like his backyard federation before his brother took all the money. You ever know about that one?
No, look, I knew that he was part of it. I knew that like the Hardys were part of it, but wow. Jeez.
Yeah. Bloody hell. Well, hey, things that happen in life, eh? So let's just get cracking with the knacking. What is your first choice, or first offering, should I say, to send straight down to hell?
Well, first of all, Ross, thank you so much for having me on here. This is a great honor and a privilege to be on here. So I really appreciate this. And I feel like you can't just say straight to hell. You need to say straight to hell.
Gotta get out there.
So my first thing that I'm sending straight to hell is the idea that you can only like one company.
Oh my God, thank you.
It blows my mind that people seem to think that if you like WWE, you can't like AEW. And if you like AEW, that you can't like WWE. And then like the last time I checked, we were wrestling fans. And it blows my mind, especially when you see these comments online. When someone says one little negative thing about WWE, immediately someone says, oh, you're an AEW mark. Or if you say something, disparaging about AEW, oh, well, why don't you just go watch Raw and SmackDown then? No, we can watch it all. We can watch Raw, SmackDown. We can watch AEW. We can watch Impact Wrestling, New Japan, Ring of Honor. We can watch it all. And we should watch it all. This is the best time to be a wrestling fan in the history of wrestling. Let's appreciate it for what it is.
Amen, brother. Bloody hell. Ever since AEW became a thing last year, I do a review series here called WTF Moments, and the amount of times I've been called an AEW shill, just because, I don't know if it's objective or not. I guess it is subjective because I'm here telling you what I think about it. AEW has less weird stuff than WWE. It's getting weirder, but it has less weird stuff. So because you're saying it's got less weird stuff, you're called an AEW shill. When you're saying positive things about WWE as well, it's such a... some people, how their brain works. It's infuriating.
And I don't remember this 20 years ago when it was Raw versus Nitro. Like if you liked Raw, you could also watch Nitro. In fact, you might have been like me where you flipped channels. And if you liked the thing that was happening on Nitro, you just abandoned Raw for the rest of the night. And that was an okay thing to do.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Blah. Do you have any sort of comeback for people who come at you with that? I don't know if you get it a lot. I'm guessing you do.
So especially last year, like I was doing a lot of interviews with AEW talent because at that time you didn't have to jump through any hoops. I had a lot of friends that had been signed to AEW, and it would be as simple as sending them a message and going, hey, do you want to come on my show and do an interview? They'd say yes, and next thing you know, we had an interview. Well, it doesn't exactly work like that with WWE. You got to jump through a bunch of corporate hoops to make those interviews happen. So I was doing 5 AEW interviews for every WWE interview, maybe more, maybe it was 10. I don't know. I wasn't keeping track. I was interviewing wrestlers and enjoying conversations with these wrestlers who were, at the top of their game. And I got a lot of comments from people being like, how come you're only promoting AEW? I'm promoting what's available to me. I want to have these great conversations, and I'm having them with people that are making themselves available to me. So my comeback to people is usually just like, it's okay to like more than one ice cream flavor, right? Like, can you imagine getting mad at someone because they liked mint chocolate chip and you were like, nah, man, now Rocky Road's the way to go. Like, you can like more than one. In fact, you can have 2 scoops on your cone. You can have 3 scoops. You can have as many scoops as you want on there.
I wonder what it is that sort of gets triggered in people's brain that makes them so against one or the other. I just don't have that inside my head. Do you?
I don't, and it's hard. This is why I want to send it straight to hell, because I don't quite understand it. And people need to realize that it's okay to like more than one thing. Maybe you can like one more than the other.
Yeah.
But just because you like one doesn't mean you have to be on the complete other end of the spectrum and hate that other thing.
God, I fully agree with you. I've got nothing to come back at you with there. It's just it's something that's really bothered me over the past year, and I guess it's just going to be a thing forevermore now, as long as there is AEW sort of going against NXT on a Wednesday night.
But how come this wasn't a thing when Impact was really starting to build there in the late 2000s? Like Impact was really starting to build in the early 2010s when they went head to head with Raw for 3 weeks or whatever that was. How come people weren't like, oh my, You like WWE? Impact Wrestling's the best, or Impact Wrestling's the best. Well, how can you watch Raw? How come that wasn't a thing then, but now it's a thing now? I just don't understand it.
Yeah, because it's weird, because back then Impact had like AJ Styles, Jeff Hardy, had all the old guys that came in, like Hogan.
Oh, they had Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, they had all the names. AEW has their names. So it is. Yeah, it's a weird thing. Maybe it is just the fact that we're apart from a little bit, they're on a different night to WWE. Maybe I'm just looking for something. But
people need to be able to appreciate it for what it is, and also appreciate this incredible time that we're living in right now, like where every wrestling match, almost ever, is just available at our fingertips. You don't have to like borrow tapes from your neighbor, the VHS tapes. You don't have to trade away, like mail them away. That was a thing. And I know that like some of our younger people listening or watching this right now are like, what are you talking about? Yeah. It used to be a thing that like you went on these forums and you said, man, do you have the 1997 Royal Rumble? Yeah, I do. It's on this VHS. I'll send it out to you. You can give me this one in exchange. That used to be a thing. Now we just pull this supercomputer that lives in our pocket out and we go, oh, okay, I'm watching the match now.
Life is good now, isn't it, in that respect?
Life's great.
Do you think this issue might go away slightly if AEW, because there was all the rumours before AEW started that they were going to be like this sports-centric wrestling promotion, none of the sports entertainment side. If they went a completely different direction with a different flavour and didn't do any of the sports entertainment stuff, like Jericho and MJF last week, would that debate go down a bit, do you think, or not?
No, I think it only heighten it. I think it would only, make the products that much more different, and it would create an even bigger divide of people going, oh, you like that thing? It's nothing like the thing that I like over here.
I only say that because I don't see it happen as much with New Japan and WWE. No doubt there's people out there, but you don't see it half as much, do you?
Yeah, and I also just think it's because it's not as available, especially here in America. Like, sure, you can find it if you're looking for it with this supercomputer that lives in our pocket. But, I know that on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock on TNT, I can watch Dynamite. And I know that on Monday night at 8 o'clock on USA Network, I can watch Raw. And that's just not the case with New Japan, on big network television.
So there we have it. The tribalism of professional wrestling fandom has gone straight to
get rid of
hell. Oh, that was more like Hawk. I don't know where that came from.
He's gonna kill.
What we having next? What's next up on the agenda?
I want to send the draft straight to hell.
Ooh, interesting.
And this is obviously timely because we just had a draft, but a draft doesn't make sense unless the true rules of a draft are being followed. And if you're drafting someone when there's 14 better, more talented people on the board, and you're drafting someone because it makes sense in the storyline, then your draft doesn't really make any sense. And then beyond that, the thing that I hate more than anything is someone will get drafted to SmackDown and then 3 weeks later, they'll show up on Raw and they'll be like, what's he doing here? He's a SmackDown superstar. No, your checks are all signed by the same company. You all work for the same company. And if the draft is truly going to be a draft, then that person needs to remain on Raw or remain on SmackDown until the next draft. You can't just be like, oh yeah, no, we're going to do this wild card thing. Yeah. So, we can have this guy come on to this show if he wants to, but if he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to. Like, this doesn't make any sense. If the draft is truly going to be a draft, it needs to have the hard and fast rules of an actual draft.
It's not like it used to be back in 04, 05, 06, is it? Those were the halcyon days of the WWE draft.
I think what was worse was the draft lottery. Like, can you imagine picking any sports team, baseball, football, hockey, basketball, by like a random lottery? You have one team with terrible players and another team stacked with great players.
Yeah. I tell you what, though, I don't know if it was just this time more than others, but Braun Strowman, especially over the past, just in the sort of weeks before the draft, he would appear on Raw and almost gave away the fact he was going to get drafted to Raw just because he's on Raw so much you knew what was coming. I don't know if that's happened before. It might just be my memory being a bit bad, but that made it even worse this time around for me. I'm
with you. Look, and I was a big fan of when the superstars appeared on Raw and then they also appeared on SmackDown and was one belt that was being defended on all the shows. And was it Linda McMahon, I think, was the one who like actually officially announced that there were going to be a brand split. This is almost 20 years ago, right? And I just remember going, I don't want to watch half those people on a different day of the week. I want to watch everybody. And I get that the roster is so big and they only have so much time. I completely understand that. In fact, we're seeing, the issue with having a large roster and only a small amount of time with Dynamite. And they're doing what they can with AEW Dark, but there's only so much time to showcase the talent. I almost think it's like, well, then have less talent. You shouldn't have one show that's better or has better talent than the other show, because it almost becomes like a microcosm of what we were talking about earlier. Then it starts to be like, I like Raw better than SmackDown, or I like SmackDown better than Raw.
I don't mind the competition aspect between WWE's, because they should feel like they're, especially now we're in Survivor Series season, it should feel like they're in competition to be the best that WWE has to offer, but it never does, because both shows just feel the same.
That's what I'm talking about. And if they're, look, I'm okay with the draft, but the draft needs to have rules that are actually followed.
And back to the wildcard rule. I think it is quite refreshing when you get to the sort of half. We have the reset every autumn, don't we? The draft happens every autumn.
Yeah, because it's the season premiere, right?
Yeah, however that happens. Why is the season premiere in the arse end of the year? It makes no sense, does it? But sort of halfway through the year, it's all right, I thought, to have a wildcard rule. If you can have 3 set people can appear on the other show at the behest, I guess, of whoever was in charge of the other show. But then that changed, didn't it? It was 4, then it was 5, then it was 6, then it was a different number. It's WWE's problem of making their own rules and then not sticking to them. They should just make their lives far simpler by having less rules. I think that would sort the issue out pretty much.
This all comes down to the idea of Vince McMahon just assumes that we have these goldfish brains. And he'll do something and then just hope that you don't remember that thing 6 months ago that had nothing to do with this thing. And, we could sit here all day and come up with literally 1,000 examples of that. But this is just another one that's on a bigger scale.
Yeah, I fully agree. So there we have it. The draft has gone straight down to hell. What are we going for your third offering, please?
I am not a fan of random tag teams. I hate when they take 2 guys who don't have something going on and they go, you're not doing anything and you're not doing anything. You guys are now a tag team. And I actually went through a list here of these are tag teams that were actual WWE tag team champions. And when I say them, they don't make any sense because they're not tag teams when you think about them. John Cena and David Otunga were tag team champions. John Cena and Shawn Michaels. Ric Flair and Roddy Piper. Hulk Hogan and John Cena. It's just John Cena and everybody, it seems like. But I also had a problem with the Bar. And I know that Sheamus and Cesaro they ended up being great together, but they are so much better on their own. And I feel like instead of just taking the lazy way out and going, all right, you don't have anything, you're both not Americans. So yeah, you have something in common. Here you go. You're a tag team now. I think that they could have built something better. And it's also a huge slap in the face to the actual tag teams who have come up as tag teams, who have put in the work as tag teams to have some makeshift tag team become a tag team champion after a few weeks.
I would hate to be a tag team wrestler in WWE today. Growing up on all the iconic tag teams, we can name them all, they're all iconic in their own right. But now today, it seems that tag team wrestling just does not matter. The way they swapped the Raw and SmackDown tag team titles, like they're just a toy, just a prop, was it was infuriating stuff in my opinion. But it's the Iconics. That is the latest one that is really, it's a step too far for me. You've got unrivaled chemistry. You can't teach that. They've been together, the whole teenage adult lives or whatever, and then they split them up, and now we've got Peyton Royce and who is it on Raw? Lacey Evans with some sort of we've just been thrown together and can't do our entrance correctly. Why would you do that?
I got excited because I thought they're breaking up because Peyton Royce is going to get a mega push, which she completely deserves. She's insanely talented in the ring. She obviously has a great look and she's full of charisma. I'm like, this is perfect. They're breaking up the Iconics because Peyton Royce is going to be on her way to becoming the champion. And it's certainly not what happened. And that's why it's so unfortunate to see this.
Why do you think it is? Do you reckon it's just down to that old thing of tag team wrestling costs more money because you need to pay 4 checks rather than 2? What is the disdain?
What an old school way of looking at it, yeah.
What is Vince McMahon's disdain for tag team wrestling?
It's obviously, AEW is doing a good job of taking these indie tag teams.
You AEW shill.
There it is, yeah. Impact Wrestling's actually doing a great job of it too. The North has become one of the best tag teams in all of wrestling. And sure, I get that you took 2 guys that had something in common and threw them together, but they also, Ethan Page and Josh Alexander had been friends with each other, like growing up, living very close together. Motor City Machine Guns, the Good Brothers, we could go on and on with the great tag teams there. I just feel like in WWE, you're treated definitely more as an individual. And I maybe in the Performance Center, they need to have like a separate ring for tag teams, because they have all these different rings in there based on, your ability level, your male or your female, whatever. Maybe they need to have like a tag team area there that can really start to build that up like grassroots and go from there.
It seems like they might do in the Performance Center, because in NXT, you have your defined tag teams. It's when we get to the main roster, it's just all completely forgotten. I just don't understand why. It's baffling.
This is why it needs to be sent straight to hell.
Hell, yeah. And it's such a shame as well, because we all know how great tag team wrestling can be. All the great matches down the years. It's
that's
a baffling thing.
That's why I really favor actual tag teams. And, it's crazy that we could probably only name a handful of them in WWE right now that are like your tried and true tag teams that have come up through the ranks together.
Usos?
That was the first one that came to my mind.
Do you have any more that come to your mind? Did John Morris and The Miz count? I'm going blank here completely.
No, they definitely don't count. No,
they've been single stars in their own right. They are good together though. Maybe they're an exception.
I guess you could say the Bollywood Boys.
Yeah. You go. Oh, let's leave NXT alone in 205 Live. Let's go main roster. Well, obviously the tag team champions on each side, New Day and Street Profits.
Look, and everybody's listening is like, you're forgetting this one. You're forgetting this. Yeah, sure. We're forgetting a handful of them. But the point is, there's not a ton of them out there. But they exist. If any indie wrestling show you're going to go to, you're going to see fantastic tag teams. Why can't those be like worked on and cultivated and then pushed?
Yeah, and people will be saying we're forgetting them, but if we went back 20 years to any era, 30 years, 40 years, we could reel off 5 tag teams straight away, because they're all iconic, all booked correctly, all fantastic. It's a baffling situation we find ourselves in today. But that's it.
I agree with you.
Thrown together tag teams, straight to hell.
Straight to hell.
What's next, please, Chris?
The ring collapse needs to go away. Okay, and I'm sure that everybody has said this on this show, but the ring collapse, first of all, it was cool the first time we saw it. It was great. And we all kind of went, oh, that's awesome. And there was the ref always, sold it so great. But now we've seen it. And I get it's not as much as everyone says. Like, it happened recently and people are like, they need to stop that. It happens every week. And it's like, that's happened like 4 times in 18 years or something like that. But I'm thinking of this more like logistically. How come close to 30 people can stand in the ring during a battle royal or during a Royal Rumble and the ring shows no signs of collapsing? And then you take just 2 individuals who happen to be larger than normal, doing one move into the middle of the ring, and the entire ring collapses. This doesn't make any sense to me. And this is why the ring collapse needs to go straight to hell. Other than the fact that, yes, I feel like it has been a little bit overused, but it's the fact that it doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's quite clear why it happens, Chris. In a normal Royal Rumble, let's say, or a Battle Royal, all the weight is dispersed, and they're falling from half the height. Whereas if we have a ring collapse spot, it's always from the middle rope, and it's always 2 slightly bigger lads, and therefore the force in that one area, that one weak area of the ring that's always weak for some strange reason. That's why it happens. It makes complete sense.
Yeah, I especially love when it collapses and there's like an explosion. Like, what? Where did that come from? What? There was some sort of pyrotechnics? What?
Which was the one that happened recently? Was it involving The Fiend?
It was The Fiend and Braun Strowman, wasn't it?
The Fiend's nowhere near big enough for that to happen. I know that Brock Lesnar might be sort of, 20 or 30 pounds heavier than Bray Wyatt is, maybe, is it a push? But that one was, that was one too far for me, that one.
But if we go back to the logistics of having all these men or women, performers standing in the ring, moves are being done while everyone's standing in the ring. Like, they're not just standing there like high-fiving each other. Like, moves are still being done in the ring. This is why, if you're going to do this thing, at least make it make sense. So that's one thing that, yeah, I can't get on board with it.
We need the heel in the situation to sort of put a Repo Man mask on and then just go around to the 4 corners of the ring, loosening all the bolts just before he hits a move. This'll work. Then it goes.
and I get that there's a certain amount of like realism that we need to throw out the window when we turn on wrestling. I completely understand that. That's actually going to lead into my next one here. But I also think that if certain things are going to be treated with a sense of realism, why do we have to ignore some other things? Like, and I get that this is wrestling, and I get that when you're a fan, you kind of just have to appreciate that not everything makes sense. Like it's very, as you know, this is very difficult to explain to someone who's not a wrestling fan, that certain things are a certain way and other things aren't a certain way. But I think when it's something as big as that, it just needs to make sense to me. They need to build a sturdier ring.
Yeah. What was the one where they had the reinforced ring? Was it some sort of cage match involved? It was on Raw, I think. It's all just sort of foggy in my head.
Wasn't this the Greatest Royal Rumble?
Was that what it was?
I don't know.
I'm picturing some sort of random cage match on Raw where they had to build a reinforced ring, and I can't quite remember who it was. Someone out there will tell me if I'm wrong. I'm probably wrong.
Anybody who's been to any wrestling show has seen what's under a ring. How do you reinforce it? What do you do?
Hornswoggle.
Extra plywood there?
Just Hornswoggle stood there, just lifting it up. The power of Hornswoggle. But I tell you what, one thing that can't go to hell, revolving around the ring collapse, is the referee bump. They die every time, and it's better every single time. They go head first. That was cited. It's absolutely fantastic.
That one was so ridiculous. Mike Chioda's first ref bump on the ring collapse was great. Like kind of like he stumbled down to the ground. It was so good. It really sold it. And then them, even them cursing when the thing collapsed. It was great. It was that was so good. And here we are. It's happened so many times since. It's almost like we expect it to happen now.
Yeah. But I think it was Charles Robinson who just sort of, the rope went and he was sort of feeling for the rope, but it wasn't there, and he just went ahead for all the respect, as Ali G would say, the respect in the world to Charles Robinson for taking that. But there we have it. The ring collapse. It has been used one too many times. Let's all accept it. It's gone straight to hell. I can't do my Vince McMahon impression when I'm sat down. I need to stand up and do it.
You need to stand up, really get into the diaphragm. Yeah.
Straight to hell. There we go. That's better. There we are.
I love doing the Vince gulp.
That's we make movies. He does suck on things, but what am I saying here? Anyway, let's move on to your final. Vince McMahon sucking on things is something I did not expect to come up during the course of this, Chris. I'm not going to lie to you. What's your fifth and final offering?
My final thing that's being sent straight to hell is complaining when wrestling gets silly. And this kind of piggybacks off what we were just talking about. And I don't think the ring collapse is silly. I just think the ring collapse is kind of illogical. But, so many people, this goes to the AEW, WWE shill thing. So many people will complain about the MJF and Chris Jericho singing. I thought this was a wrestling company. I thought this was supposed to be about wrestling. Or some of my favorite videos on YouTube, like the most illegal move in the history of wrestling. This is the most illegal move in wrestling, where they hypnotize the locker room and turns into this dance party. I think it's so incredibly entertaining. Or that was in CZW, by the way, or the slow motion wrestling. I think it's so entertaining and it's different. And look, here's the thing. Wrestling has always been a little bit silly. Why is wrestling in 2020 being a little bit silly any different from the wrestling in the 80s or the 90s? And I think that we could kind of also jump off of this and saying wrestling wasn't always better. If I were to have an honorable mention here, I would say wrestling wasn't always better. I think there's a huge nostalgia factor that's thrown into that where people go, oh, it's not as good as it used to be. It's not like the Attitude Era. No, it's not like the Attitude Era. And we took a lot of the great stuff from the Attitude Era, and now we're enjoying whatever you want to call this era that we have right now. So I think that if you want, everything's available right now. Wrestling's like a buffet right now. I love it. And if you want your, realistic shoot wrestling, you've got that. If you want some over the top crazy wrestling, you've got that. If you want something that's a little bit silly, that's also available. If you want great tag teams, ladder matches, weapons, you want violence, it's all available right now. And I think that when wrestling starts to get just a little bit silly or likes to, kind of poke fun of it itself, people have a real issue with that. And what I'm saying is it's okay. It's okay to like that. Wrestling's always been a little bit silly.
I tell you what, coming out of that Chris Jericho and MJF thing last week, I don't understand how you could watch that with those two wrestlers. It could only work with those two. Those two as characters, they would do that sort of thing. I can't see how you could watch that and come out there thinking, oh, this is embarrassing. I just thought, character-wise, it was perfect for those two to do. And it's just it's the sort of comments you see again, people going, oh, if this happened on WWE, no one would like it. Well, when it does happen on WWE, we'll cast our judgment there, because as far as I can remember, they haven't done many musical numbers on WWE.
I was just so impressed with, I mean, if you really go back into the archives, you know that MJF can sing. Like, you know, there's that classic clip of him on Rosie O'Donnell where he's singing "You Are My Sunshine." I was blown away. That was like Broadway quality singing, especially from MJF. We know that Jericho can sing. He's a legitimate rock star. But I started watching this and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. They're lip syncing like this classic, like Frank Sinatra song. And then I kept watching and I went, oh no, like they're actually singing. You know how much time and effort would have to go into, first of all, writing that song, then putting it together, then practicing it, then getting the dancers and choreographing everything. This wasn't just like they snapped their fingers and like went out and did this thing and, you know, called it in the ring. Like this took a lot of preparation, and my hat's off to them, number one, for trying something different, but number two, for pulling it off and making this thing look great.
Yeah, I was laughing from start. I just couldn't believe it when they initially started singing. I just didn't. We wouldn't expect to flick on AEW last week and see that. But yeah, I call it silly bollocks because that's an English phrase we use over here. Silly bollocks in pro wrestling is absolutely fantastic. Just to quieten the people down who are no doubt calling myself and Chris AEW shills right now. New Day down the years. When they do silly bollocks, few do it better than New Day. So there you go. There's the scales even there.
There's been lots of silly stuff. You know, look at, you know, the most popular segment in the history of Raw was, you know, This Is Your Life with The Rock and Mankind. That segment was so ridiculous and so silly, but also like so entertaining. And I think what makes a great wrestling show is being able to take from all those little things, put it together in one show and give people what they're, you know, looking for all across the board. And the crazy thing is you're never going to, you know, please everybody. You're never going to please everyone in a 2-hour show, whether it's SmackDown or Dynamite or Impact or whatever, or a 3-hour show like Raw. It's very difficult.
And that's fine as well, just to not like something. It's fine as well just to watch something and go, oh, it's not quite my speed. That, you know, we've seen many companies down the air try some zany things, and it hasn't quite got the desired response from everybody. But that's just, you take chances, don't you? In creativity stuff, you just take chances. Yeah. Weird how some things hit and some things don't, isn't it?
It's very strange. So I'm saying your judgment against silly bollocks. I like that. I know it doesn't sound as good with my accent. Silly bollocks. Yeah.
It's a very British thing. Yeah. Silly bollocks is nice.
Silly bollocks. Is that okay?
Bollocks.
Bollocks.
I'm offended. It sounds Scottish, that.
Nah, geez. You know, I have the Queen on my money. I'm from Canada.
Really? I never knew that.
Yeah, the Queen is on like the $20 bill, the $1 coin. Yeah.
Ooh, we'll swap it sometime. Why the hell not?
Let's do it. Next time I'm there, I'll bring some loonies and toonies for you.
Who knows when that might be?
Oh, goodness.
Few years' time. So there we have it, Chris. There's your 5 things gone straight down to hell. I'd like to thank you very much, first of all, for coming on, because I didn't think you would. Just being the Mr. Positive Wrestling guy there is out there, thinking, wow, if there's one series he won't do, it's this one. So thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you for the invite. What a nice surprise to be invited to be on the show. And man, this was great. So, and thank you for like helping me to expand my mind. It did. It definitely took me like all of the last 2 weeks to narrow this down and figure this out. So I appreciate you helping me to expand my brain and figure out all of these things.
Yeah, one of the working titles for this series was Wrestle Therapy. And I think it fits a bit better than Straight to Hell, because people, you do, just venting's nice, isn't it? You just have to find what to vent about.
That's exactly what this is. I should have been like laying down on a very comfortable couch.
A chaise longer.
Very nice.
So just before you go, anything you would like to plug? Camera's all yours.
Yeah, I'm at Chris Van Vliet. So that's on all social media. My podcast is called The Chris Van Vliet Show. I'm on YouTube at Chris Van Vliet. So it'd be great to follow me. If you could follow me on there, say hi. It'd be great to connect with you.
It's well worth doing. As I say, one of, if not the best interviewer in the game today. And I'm not ashamed to say that when you sat here looking at me, Chris. I'm not going to blush.
My good. Well, thank you. My goodness. Those are very kind words, especially coming from someone like you. So, Ross.
What do you mean, someone like me?
Oh, what's that? Oh, I gotta go. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. You guys do such incredible work, and to be able to share some time with you on the channel has been awesome.
No, thank you very much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for doing it.
Pleasure's mine.
Right. We'll see you next time on Straight to Hell. Wave to the camera, Chris.
Straight to hell.